Waar ligt de grens tussen waarheid en fictie? Zijn verhalen sowieso gelogen? En wat betekent waarheid in een wereld waarin alles kan? De studenten redactievaardigheden aan de KU Leuven zoeken dat voor jullie uit.
Episode 5, Costuming, by Lisbeth and Karen.
In this episode, we discuss the accuracy of historical clothing in, for example, period dramas such as Bridgerton, reenacting events. Should it always be the goal to be as historically accurate as possible, or are there contexts in which it matters less?
Bridgerton gets costumes all
The
wrong.
Queen and her court randomly dressed 20 plus years out of fashion.
Regency dresses are supposed to be ridiculously flattering, and they made it look like most of them were wearing
The
tags.
clothing and hair is all over the place.
It makes no sense. You should never, ever wear a corset on the skin.
The below the bust waistlines were terrible.
The hair, especially on Daphne, was awful. Those bangs looked like a 5-year-old cut them with blunt scissors.
This is just a small selection of Reddit comments on Bridgerton after the first season aired. The fierce criticism on the lack of accuracy in the historical costumes of the show makes clear that many people have strong feelings regarding this subject.
However, fans on social media only tell one side of the story. We shouldn't forget about the experts in the field. What do people who are engaged in making historical costumes every single day think of the historical accuracy of period dramas in general? We sent a message to Shari van der Waals Atala, a seamstress with her own historical bespoke clothing atelier La Rose Couture. A few days later, we already got a response. She told us she'd love to answer our questions.
At first, it seemed like her opinion on the historical accuracy of costumes in period dramas was quite black and white, much like some of the previously mentioned social media groups.
The things that irk me very much, and I know I'm going to be very unpopular for saying this, is series like Bridgerton. The designs were so unserious, crazy, and outrageous that they kind of overshadowed the storyline. They overshadowed the fact that the costumes of that period were known for certain aesthetics and certain skills and colors and fabrics. To me, it looked very cheap. I've noticed that a lot of the materials were very cheap. It looked a bit like, like an AliExpress version of a Regency dress, to be honest. And which is very unkind to the designers, and I'm sorry. It's just my personal opinion. I know they worked very hard at the costume department to create a certain vision, but it annoyed me to such a point that I couldn't even watch it in the background.
Hold up. Did she really call it an AliExpress version? Should everything that isn't completely historically accurate really be dismissed?
Although she is very critical, Shari also acknowledges that there are more sides to this story.
I can watch series and shows and enjoy them if they're not historically accurate at all. If the designs at least marry into the storyline in a period and not fight it, like The Favorite, where they emulated the feeling and the style of that time and the silhouette, but they used modern materials in a very history-friendly way. You could almost imagine they would use these old kind of jeans and those laser cutouts because it fitted the storyline, it fitted the period very well.
Sometimes her reason to watch a show is more arbitrary.
I watched the show once because I like one hat. I mean, if that's reason enough for you to watch the show, watch it.
The importance of historical accuracy of costumes is also strongly related to the context.
If you do it as a hobby, then the rules are up to you. I have friends who absolutely enjoy hand stitching their complete outfit the way it was used to do, the way they used to do it from the period they're recreating. So historical accuracy from the sewing techniques, the fact that they spend months on it, they're sourcing materials all over the world, is what that gives them enjoyment. And someone else has a fabric laying at home that they bought on a holiday. That is like, I have Thai silks, but they want to make a Regency dress of it? Go ahead. unless you are specifically paid to be a reenactor or showcase a storyline like in a castle or a museum, and you have to show an audience how it used to be. That is your role or your job. Then, of course, historical accuracy to the point, which is reasonable within this time and age, is very important.
Last but not least, it is impossible to make a perfect copy of the past.
Nobody is 100% historically accurate, no one in the world, because you cannot make you cannot get the original fabrics, you cannot get the original materials, you cannot do everything like they used to do. And we need to let go of that. It takes longer than you might think, it takes more work than you might think. And that's why I admire everyone so much who makes historical clothing for themselves, because you are your own corset maker, you are your own underpinnings maker, you are your own embroiderer, you are what used to be maybe 10 different guilds into one, while also doing research, while also making it and wearing it in modern day times. And that is something that should be praised more, I think.
By now, it is very clear that historical accuracy in films or series is not a must. Another phenomenon that we discussed with Shari, and that was briefly mentioned earlier, is mixing historical and modern elements in clothing. This is called history bounding.
History bounding is when you take elements from historical clothing and incorporate them into modern style. That could be the cut of a dress, it could be the print on a dress, like the toile de juillet. You see a lot that used to be curtains into modern day pants, for example, and it could be incorporating original antique items or your own historical accurate wardrobe, but combine them with modern day clothing. And I absolutely love that.
Sometimes like-minded people come together at historical events such as soirees, the perfect occasion to show off their costumes. A nowadays very popular theme for a ball is the Regency period, the 1810s, the time period that Bridgerton, theoretically, is set in.
But people do not only organize Regency-themed soirees. There are also gatherings that are, for example, Edwardian, Rococo or Victorian-inspired. We asked Shari if she noticed some trends in these events.
Yes, there has been a rise in events, and it's very much tied into which shows are popular. When Gentleman Jack was popular, everyone went 1830s crazy. And that period is already, in a good way, very crazy. And when Bridgerton came with a second season, you had Bridgerton balls for the first time. So those trends are connected.
So, the bottom line for Shari seems to be that when it comes to historical accuracy, there is only one place where there is no room for compromises: when the costumes are used for educational purposes, such as in museums or reenacting events. On all other occasions, she believes people are free to experiment, and she even encourages it. But please, don't mention Bridgerton.
When it comes to the fans, on the other hand, opinions are mixed. While it is true that a lot of people have condemned the lack of historical accuracy of series like Bridgerton, as we saw earlier, the show has proven to be one of the most successful Netflix originals ever, with no less than 82 million households having tuned in during the first month of its initial release. So, in the end, many fans don't seem to let the lack of historical accuracy hold them back from enjoying their favorite shows.